John here with Ripewave Audio and back an eighth and final time with Sony's flagship AV receiver, the STR-AZ7000ES. And in this video, we are going to conclude by looking at its DTSX Pro capabilities. This is something Sony doesn't really advertise. We're going to take a look at that and give a final conclusion which sums up all these 8 videos and what we thought, what was good and what wasn't so good, and a repeat on a little bit on the sound quality. If you missed the first 7 videos, the first one was a comparison against its nearest peers and a unboxing of the unit. And then in the second video, we got into the configuration and the calibration with D.C.A.C 9. And 3, we covered the user experience, including sound modes such as the spatial sound mapping. In 4th video, we did the sound comparison against all the other AV receivers and processors that we have looked at in-house here roughly over the last year. And then in video 5, we did the 360 reality audio. And in 6, we covered the dual center capability, how to focus that on the television screen if you don't have an acoustically transparent screen. In video 7, the 360 reality audio was covered again to provide the reference layout for speakers, where you have 5 on the ceiling, 5 at ear level, and 3 on the floor in the front of the room. And in this video, as we say, we're going to cover DTSX Pro. Now, this is not something that we've seen in other processors and receivers that we've covered to date. Now, I think we're going to start seeing more of these crop in. We're expecting, of course, the upper models of Denon, Marantz. They've already had it, but we haven't looked at those yet. With the new Denon AVR X6800H coming along, that will be the first Denon model that's in recent history at the lowest price point that will deliver it. So that will be a good comparison here. Before we get into the DTSX Pro stuff, just a quick revisit on the last video when we looked at the 360 reality audio reference system. This is where we had those speakers on the floor, left, right, and center. We kind of ad hoc put this together, but we got it to work and it did sound good. But what we found is it does have some limitations. It really works best with its native content, as we find. Now, when you're running the native content, you can't do the 360 spatial sound mapping. You turn that on and then suddenly you lose all of the object placements and you just got that spaciousness. And of course, we would turn that off always when we had this reference format, and we didn't think it translated well for watching movies and so forth. We tried that and it didn't seem like it was coming out those floor level speakers. So I don't recommend it for anything but listening to the 360 reality audio sources. And this has got 2 slots. So if you did have this configuration, I would do 1 speaker configuration with the reality audio reference, and then the other one to be more suited as kind of the standard Dolby Atmos DTSX type of layout. So that's my recommendation there. But now moving on to DTSX Pro, you do see that the normal DTSX is limited to those 11 channels plus subwoofer, and it's capped at that. If you want to go beyond that number of speakers, this is where DTSX Pro came in around 2019. I think the first processors came out in 2020, and this supports a lot of speakers, and it will remap. It will take all that content. So it's not new content out there. So you could take a DTSX movie and it will upmix to the other channels. So it's really upmixing when those other channels are present. So what I have is a turn-off representation here where they can lay out to a lot of speakers. But when it comes to this unit and its implementation of DTSX Pro, you're mainly getting your front wide speakers. That's what you're getting in addition to the normal DTSX. You're not getting all those speakers, let's say a Trinoff or a Storm can provide for DTSX Pro. But it is kind of nice. So this is something I've been wanting to explore. Our RMC1 does have capability of front wides, and it can be used in that case with Dolby Atmos. But for DTSX, this RMC1 doesn't have DTSX Pro, it just has the standard one. If you compare this against 360 reality audio, we can see, the capabilities of DTSX Pro could have those same speakers on the floor. So you could have, and then some. You could represent a 360 reality audio with that DTSX Pro. The 360 reality audio layout is really like a subset of what DTSX prescribes as possible with its Pro edition. When we're talking about this unit, of course, it's just the front wides and not what you need for a 360 reality audio reference. Of course, you don't have to do reference for 360 reality audio. It will map to whatever you have in your room, which is a nice thing. So how do we set this up with the 7000 that can take up to 13 speakers? And we've seen this diagram before. So we go back into our auto calibration. We start this up. We pick one of the presets to put in this new speaker configuration. I've retaken the monitor audio speakers that I was using on the floor, and now I'm going to use them as front wides, powering them from the 7000 ES. Of course, these aren't wireless, so we'll just skip that. We're not using the TV as center. So for the surround back, we can set this to surround back. We can reuse those Polk audio speakers. We brought them back to the back of the room. Since we're moving off the reality audio reference system, I can place them back there, and they can be used in this case with the front wides. So that's what we'll do. Height 1 speakers will be height 1, and height 2 will be height 2. And here we get the choice for height 3. Instead of being height 3, this is where you have the choice of doing them front wides. So if you do want to use front wides with the 7000 ES, you're giving up on the third row of heights, but you're also giving up on a second center channel speaker or zone 2. But we're just focusing on a single theater right now. And in this case, yes, no center 2 speaker, just the front wides. So that's a trade-off. You have to decide, do I want more focus on the television, or do I want to do front wides? In my case, I think we're going to like the front wides because my center speaker, by the time it gets to the seating position and the angle of the television and everything, I don't really notice a big problem with dialogues not being centered. It was a little better with the top center speaker in place, but I think I'm looking for something a little more dramatic, and maybe I'm better off using it in the front. Let's see. So we go to set this up, and they're looking for now the layout of the listener level speakers, or the ear level speakers. And you have a choice of 7 with front wides, so there's no rear surrounds, 1 with subwoofer, the same layout, an 8 channel where you give up on your center speaker altogether, and you bring back the rear surrounds. Now you have that same layout with a subwoofer with an 8.1. Then you get to a 9 where you bring back the center channel and you keep the rear surrounds, but you now have front wides. And of course, 9.1, all that with a subwoofer. This is where we want to do for our Ripewave audio theater for this configuration. So we'll do 9.1. And on the height, we'll do as we always have with top front and top rear speakers on the overhead. Of course, you get the configuration confirmation on the speaker pattern. So 9.1.4, front wides plus top front plus top rear. Yes, that's what we want to do. And they give you a chance now to check the speaker terminals and where you're going to wire this in. Everything is normal except for the front wide right, which will be configured on height 3 right, and your front wide left, which will be configured on height 3 left. Everything else is normal. With that in place, you run the D.C.A.C 9, all standard process. It just adds in those extra speakers. And once you're done, it will tell you, just as before, all the others run the same way, the distance. So it is calculating the distance. It looks like these are around 7-8 feet versus my regular mains. They're clocking in around 11 feet. So that's how it's figured them. It felt like it needed to decrease the volume a little bit, half a decibel for those. So we got the distance and the levels. This looks all good, and we're going to save it. Of course, you can also do speaker relocation, and we seem to like the results on this. And I seem to like Type A, which is slated, really more for movie content, but I listen to it with music as well. So I kind of like that one. And then we activate the calibration matching, and we can also see the demo, but we've seen that before. Now, one thing I'll point out, after this is all saved and finished with your calibration, you now have your up to two speaker presets. And I like to toggle. So I was toggling between with and without front wides. And I've been using the web interface as the quickest way to switch. But I find the Sony 7000ES doesn't switch very well through this. It seems like to really fully move over to the other speaker preset, what works the best but very slow, and it cuts the volume completely, is doing it through the on-screen display menus. It will do it through this, and you have to kind of coax and work at it to go to switch back and forth. So this is a little disappointing. I can't switch between the two speaker presets as quickly as I would like. It was working a little better the other day when we were doing the prior videos, but for this one, it seems to be very finicky and not working well. I don't know if some of you have also experienced some issues switching back and forth, and it takes a while to really lock into a new speaker preset. So what did I think of the front wides? Well, I liked them. I really did, and it seemed to work with a lot of content. I could use it with the 360 spatial sound mapping. It would invoke those. If I had a DTS source, it worked with them. If it's using Neural X upmixer, it works with them. If I'm using Dolby Atmos, it works with that. So it does use the front wides. I was getting it, using it with music and movies, and I felt it added a lot to the dynamics of the room. Now, it's not an essential piece of equipment, but having it and trying it, it's something, hey, if I have it, I'd run it. I think it sounds good. I think it's a noticeable difference. Have you had experience with front wides? That feedback would be really good. So be sure to comment on that at the end here. But what I wanted to cover now is the pros and cons of the 7000ES. What did we learn through this 8-part series with this flagship? There's a lot of pros, but there's also some cons. So pros, the ease of calibration. I think this has been the quickest to set up, to run through a calibration of anything else. I think the Yamaha was pretty quick. But when you do a Dirac or an Anthem Arc Genesis, those take a long time to do. Maybe Odyssey is somewhere in between, but this is really darn quick. I like the flexible speaker layouts and the fact that you can use things like wireless speakers. Now, it has to be part of their ecosystem in one of the Sony models, but there are times when somebody just really needs to use a wireless speaker, and in fact, they have battery-powered versions too. So if you can't run really a wire at all, that could be an option. The dialogue centering options, it's nice to have. The center lift, the acoustic center sync, the dual centers, that's nice to have. Their technology to do virtual speaker relocation if you can't put them in the ideal positions. Particularly if your front speakers are mounted in the ceiling and it tries to bring those down to give that illusion that they're not mounted on the ceiling. That's really good. So I think this receiver is great for somebody who has less than ideal speaker locations. And the 360 spatial sound mapping that goes with it gives it this spaciousness. I really could notice, and it did add a nice element. I didn't like it for all content, but it was nice. Now, we'll come back. There's a negative to that one as well. But from the spaciousness category, it does really well. This is the only brand that I know that will have the 360 reality audio reference layout. This we're talking about is 5 in the ceiling, 5 at ear level, 3 on the floor. Now, Denon, Marantz, and Macintosh, and I know to support MPEG-H, and they can decode that format and map it to the speakers that are configured with those processors and receivers. But it doesn't have the reference speaker layout that we demonstrated in the last video. It supports DTSX Pro, and not many processors and receivers do. So that's a plus. The sound quality, top tier. Has DSD64 support. Now, I'm surprised it doesn't have better than DSD64 because, after all, Sony was there with Super Audio CD. So anyhow, it's room ready. There's a lot of integration tools. There's video signal tests. There's integrations and triggers. Really good for the custom integrator. Now, what about the cons? This removable cover, they could have done better than that. The remote, they could have done a lot better than this remote. No backlight, light, flimsy. Same one they use with a $100 DVD player. There's no headphone jack. There's no phono input. There's only an FM radio. There's no AM radio. I mean, come on, that's just being cheap, I think. The front display, very hard to read. And the, I think, really unexcusable thing is when you start doing some of these other alternate layouts for surround back and for the height 3, it doesn't have different labels for those. It won't show front. It won't show the floor ones as a different label. It's showing up as height 3. There's limited information on the on-screen display. It's not the worst I've seen, but it's near the worst. The mobile app, they got to do a lot better on their mobile app, and they've got to do better on their web interface. Very limited. The web interface is more for configuration. The mobile app is more for playback, but they're not giving you information about the source content and what it's outputting. I want to see it's receiving source as what? Atmos, or it's receiving it as True HD, or whatever it is. Or tell me that you're receiving the 360 reality audio. It doesn't even tell me that when I get that signal in. It's a leap of faith in a lot of cases. And then what are we putting it out to? What speakers are active? What is it doing? Which ones are upmix and which ones are native? I like that information. The 360 spatial sound mapping, a lot of times, not always, seems to suck the bass out. When I turn it off, the bass comes back. I find that odd, and there's no settings there. So I prefer to keep it off in a lot of cases, even though I like the spaciousness of the 360 spatial sound mapping. There's no oral 3D support, and I know a large number of you who are tuning in care about that format, especially as an upmixer. There's only 2 speaker presets. Come on. And I think with all these flexibility in speakers, this is when you could really use a few more presets. There's limited subwoofer management. You can manually go in and set speakers to large or small and set the crossover. But the D.C.A.C 9 is doing nothing to calibrate that I could see. Doesn't seem to be any phase adjustment. And it's a single sub output. And I have 2 subs, and some people have more. There's no PEQ. There's only a 2-band cut boost that you can play around. Bass, treble. Welcome to the 70s. 360 reality audio. It's only coming through Chromecast and AirPlay only, and Bluetooth, right? but it's not doing the HDMI that Denon Marantz and Macintosh are doing. The reference layout has limited use, I think its real use case is native content. And you don't get the display status of what's going on. Am I receiving reality? Is it real? Is it real or isn't? Am I getting reality audio? And this unit doesn't fully support HDMI 2.1, which I think is a shame because here they are, they've got the PlayStation 5, and there's no quick media switching and no quick frame transport QFT. I find that odd. So that's my assessment of this. What's your thoughts? I still think this is worthy to get, but I wanted to point out the pros and the cons so you can make an informed decision. I know some of you have written in and said, you just got the 5,000, you just got the 7,000. I congratulate you because I do think this is a great sounding unit. It's doing things that no other receiver or processor are doing. I just wish it would have checked a few more boxes. So what are your thoughts? Please put those comments in, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to this Ripewave audio community. And if you want to take your involvement to the next level, we have our Patreon site at www.patreon.com/Ripewave. You can always hit that one-time donation button. That's been working out well. Thank you for all that. And as always, it doesn't cost anything to hit that bell notification so you're informed when the next video is posted. Until then, keep evolving your audio experience.